Okay, class, lecture number 23. So we're almost through the 26 lectures that we're going to have. All right, during our previous lecture, we talked about the 1856 presidential election. James Buchanan won that presidential election. That's the first election that we're going to see the Republicans, that's the modern-day Republican Party, participate in. Somewhere through here, we went through the Dred Scott decision. You probably learned way more than you ever wanted to know about Dred Scott. Bottom line on it, Dred Scott lost his case. Roger B. Taney was the Supreme Court Chief Justice that was presiding over that case. We also went through the 1858 Lincoln-Douglas debates. Abraham Lincoln got a face out of this. In other words, people would recognize him. And, of course, Stephen A. Douglas won that senatorial race from Illinois in 1858. We also spent some time talking about John Brown and John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry at the arsenal there at Harper's Ferry. It took place in October in 1859. John Brown and all his followers, they were summarily hanged or they were either killed in the foray that took place at Harper's Ferry. All right, and we mentioned a very dramatic presidential election of 1860, and that's where the Democratic Party could not come to a consensus on who their candidate would be. So they put forth two candidates, a Northern Democratic candidate, a Southern Democratic candidate. John C. Breckinridge, Northern Democratic candidate, Stephen A. Douglas. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican nominee, and John Bell was a Constitutional Union Party nominee. And, of course, Abraham Lincoln won that presidential election with 40% of the popular votes. We closed out the class period talking about Southern secession. Southern fire eaters were demanding secession, particularly in the area of South Carolina. South Carolina becomes the first state to secede from the Union, followed by 6 others. That gave us 7 southern states that seceded from the Union. I'll go through those again in a few minutes when we go back to the map here. All right, now I think in the closing parts of the class period, I also told you about federal arsenals, federal forts that will be just taken over by the Confederacy. One exception to that was Fort Pickens. Another exception to that was that of Fort Sumter. So anyway, let's go to Fort Sumter, and I'm going to go back to my camera here, folks, and let you see kind of what it looked like. And this is, use a little bit of imagination here. And Fort Sumter, let's get some lighting here. Fort Sumter is located at Charleston. It's in the harbor of Charleston. Now, where Charleston is located is right here. And Charleston is formed in the confluence here of the Ashley River and the Cooper River. Interesting place to visit if you wish to do so. And we have Fort Sumter that's just right out in the middle of the bay of the harbor there too. Now let's take a look around and let's see what we have here. If we go over to this side here, which would actually be on the eastern side, you have Fort Moultrie. This is a place where Sergeant William Jasper distinguished himself with the 2nd South Carolina Regiment during the Revolutionary War. And this happened to be at this time renamed from Fort Sullivan to Fort Moultrie, and it has gun batteries that are in place here pointed towards Fort Sumter. If we go up to this region here, back towards Charleston itself at Mount Pleasant, we had another artillery battery at Battery Point here in Charleston itself, and you can go there today and actually you see the monument there to Sergeant William Jasper in the 2nd South Carolina Regiment. But you had another battery that was present there at Battery Point. Over here at Fort Johnson, another battery, and at Cummings Point over here at Morris Island, we had yet again another battery. So you can see, and those are all Confederate batteries, by the way, artillery batteries. So you can see Fort Sumter's in a very precarious position. And it was being commanded by a person by the name of Major Anderson, and he refused to give the fort up. So on April the 12th and April the 13th, 1861, the Confederates opened fire. It is thought that the first shots were fired here from Fort Johnson. We don't really know about that, but that is what it is thought anyway. And for the course of 33 hours, over 4,000 artillery rounds pounded Fort Sumter. In return, with Major Anderson and the United States forces firing back at the Confederates, they fired 1,000 rounds back. If you go there today inside Fort Sumter, you can actually see some of the cannonballs, that are embedded within the walls on the interior of the fort. And you can reach out, and when I was there, you could actually reach out and rub your hands on those cannonballs and say a little prayer that it wouldn't blow up in your face. All right, so let me try to share a couple of things with you folks here, and I think I'll try to do the first one. And it's kind of interesting if you go to Fort Sumter. That's a little ferry boat that will carry you out to Fort Sumter. Now, the interior of the fort is right here, and that's exactly what it looks like on the inside, by the way. I guess you could possibly swim in shark-infested waters out to Fort Sumter, but I don't recommend that you do that. You know, just spend whatever it is, $15 or something like that. Go out and have yourself some fun there. Okay, so let me go back to myself here and show you a couple of visuals that I have. Let's see if I can get this properly positioned here. And this is an artist rendering showing you Fort Sumter. And what you're seeing there above Fort Sumter, that is a flare. That's an illumination flare that was done at 4:30 in the morning, on the 12th of April in 1861. And that was when that illumination flare was fired over the fort. That was a signal there for all the other batteries to start firing on the fort. All right, and I have this book in my classroom. If you were with me, you could be able to actually go through that book. There's a lot of interesting photographs and so forth. Okay, here's some other things here with this. You can see this is the after photograph. That's on the top of Fort Sumter. Today, when you go there, Fort Sumter has only 2 levels to it. So if you look at the bottom photograph, that's what Fort Sumter looked like in 1865 at the end of the war. So it had been just totally demolished by the end of the war. Since that time, it's been built back. It has 2 levels to it, and of course just a tourist attraction today. But in later wars, beyond the Civil War, it would be used as a battery, as a boundary fort, to help protect the coastline of the United States. That was all the way up until World War I, by the way. Okay, so Fort Sumter fell. And we'll move along here, folks. And let me get myself organized, put some things back together there. And shortly after this, after Fort Sumter, we'll find that Virginia will succeed from the United States of America and join the Confederacy. Arkansas will do the same thing. Tennessee, likewise, will do the same thing. And the last of the Confederate states to succeed from the Union is that of North Carolina on the as number 11 on May the 20th in 1861. So let me go back here and let's see if we can pick this up on our map here, and I'm going to have to adjust it a little bit for you good folks here. Let's try to get this right. All right, so we had these 7 original Confederate states, and you can see those in the deep green. And if you look at the lighter green, you can see Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia. So that brings us up to a total of 11 Confederate states. All right, so we also had several states that are called border states. Let's see, I'll get to that in just a second. And these border states would include Missouri and Kentucky and Maryland, and some people even include Delaware in that. And I find it challenging to myself anyway to include Delaware as a southern state. And so anyway, so border states here are Missouri and Kentucky, and we had Maryland. And what you find here is that for those states, the South had anticipated that those 3 states, the border states, would succeed from the Union. And the North was assuming that they would not, and actually they never did. But all of those states there that I just mentioned there, Missouri, Kentucky, and Maryland, did supply troops for not only the North, but also for the South. And it gets kind of confusing if you're a student of this, because on one example here, you may be looking at studying Missouri, and you'll see like the 8th Missouri CSA. That's 8th Missouri Regiment that fought for the Confederacy. And then you also see in the same stroke there the 16th Missouri USA that fought for the United States of America. So anyway, that's kind of confusing with that. All right, so let's go back to my camera here, and we'll move on and see what else we have here. All right, here we go. With the border states here, and these border states of Missouri and Kentucky and Maryland. And I want you to recognize those too. Okay. Now, your textbook poses a question here. Could the war have been prevented? Gee, I don't know. With everything we've talked about here, folks, what if there had been no westward expansion? Maybe that would have helped. No Dred Scott decision, no Kansas-Nebraska Act. What if Mr. Lincoln had not won the presidential election? What if it had been Stephen A. Douglas? What if we had Henry Clay to still be living here, the great compromiser, the great pacificator? Anyway, it's just hard to tell. I don't think the Civil War could have been prevented. It was just too much damage, too much difference of strife between the North and the South. All right, so let's move on with this now. And I want to make some comparisons. And if you're following in your textbook, you can do likewise on page 368, I believe it is anyway, that makes some comparisons, and I'm going to try to condense this for you good folks here a little bit. But if we look at the northern population is 22 million. Southern population is 9 million. Just stack it up here, friends. 22 million people against 9 million people. You know who's going to win that war. The North was largely agrarian, but what little industry we had in the country was found in the North. In the South, only about 3% of the nation's industry were found there. The South is primarily an agrarian society. So in the South, they just did not have the war resources to fight as effectively as the North. All right, let's take a look at the railroad miles here. For the North, ironically, it comes out to 22 again, the South 9. And for the North had 22,000 miles of railroads. Those railroads ran in every direction. And as I pointed out to you at an earlier time, the South had 9,000 miles of railroads, and most of the railroads in the South went east to west, which means that you cannot supply logistically, with rail anyway, your troops that are fighting up in Virginia or elsewhere. Okay, now the South placed a great deal of stock and a lot of importance in cotton. And I've mentioned that to you before about King Cotton diplomacy, and the South just honestly felt that the North would have to just bend to the wills of the South because the South controlled the cotton. And the South was trying to use this as leverage against the North, and particularly with that of French and English, who had their textile industries, and they also needed Southern cotton. But I'll tell you something, when we got a naval blockade placed around the southern port cities, and cotton cannot go out, the English and the French were very resourceful in that they could get cotton elsewhere. You could get it from Egypt. You could get it from India. So there were other things too. All right, now I want you to imagine this too. Southern congressmen, by and large, have left their seats in the House of Representatives and the Senate and the United States Congress and the District of Columbia. So what this means is that northern politicians, northern congressmen, not having southern opposition, can pass virtually any legislation that they want. And what everyone had expected about Kansas becoming into the Union as a slave state, Kansas enters the Union as a free state. So we're going to see some interesting acts to pass here, one in particular, which was called the Homestead Act. And I want you to just think about this, and I want you to know this too, the Homestead Act. If you, as head of household, if you were settling, say out in Oklahoma or Missouri or someplace like that, if you could homestead 160 acres of land, claim that for yourself, and live on that land for 5 years and pay the government $10, it's yours. Wouldn't that be an incentive to move to the West and establish a homestead there? $10, if you can imagine that, for 160 acres of land, live on it for 5 years. All right, so anyway, that's one of the things they did. Hang on here. I've got messages coming in, and it's going to sit here and beep on my computer while we're trying to lecture this. And so anyway, I had to delete that. Another congressional act that was passed, and let's see if I can find this. And can I find it here? And I'm not getting it here. Okay. I'm missing something here. Okay.